Je vais parler de one of those tricky questions that usually doesn't get a real, aka defined number next to it, which is what really is the threshold income that one would need to have a realistic chance of becoming financially independent, retirement early, optional, I'd say. Okay? Hey, XenPuck here. Another day not working for the man. So because I've been retired for a handful of years now, and I'm quite proud of that achievement, I get into conversations with random people all the time about FIRE, right? Now, most people are of course surprised that I've managed to retire before I'm an old geezer, and a very common reaction right afterwards is that they start to ponder whether the same scenario is possible for them as well, right? Now, for anyone who is remotely interested in FIRE understands the basic tenet is pretty easy, right? You spend less than you make, you can save. The more you save, the easier and quicker it is to get to early retirement. But we also live in the real world, and often I find myself qualifying this very sound advice with a caveat, and that caveat is simple. I have to first find out whether my audience is making, a decent living, right? And I'll tell you the answer to this question immediately that I outlined, which is how much money does one need to make to consider FIRE realistically, right? Now the rest of the clip, I'm just going to tell you the why. So realistically, I think the earning floor should be at least the median income of the country, which depends on who you ask, is about 60 to 70K a year, right, in the United States of America, okay, for a household, right? I mean, I am sure, people will disagree with me no matter which number I picked. But hey, that's why you should stick around and hear my incredibly reasonable rationale behind this opinion, okay? Anyway, if you're intrigued by what I might say, please subscribe, like, comment, share, all that social media, whatever, okay? Because I'm rich enough for me, and I'll be great regardless. So let's first get to the sad part, okay? Get that out of the way. Why is it that I think if you make less than 70K a year, that FIRE probably shouldn't be top of your mind, okay? Well, let me just back up 1 second, right? That's not entirely true. I think for just about everyone, having a FIRE mentality is a great idea, okay? No matter how little money you make at the moment. This is of course because I think when people try to get to FIRE, their mentality just becomes tougher, and then we tend to work out our frugality muscles more often and more diligently, and going about life in this manner is simply very, very helpful, no matter which part of the financial journey you're actually on. But and here's a big but, right? If you make less than the median income per household, aka 60 to 70K, there's simply a real floor as to how much spending you can cut down to, okay? Focusing too much on spending less is just, well, not a very hopeful type of outlook to maintain, especially over the long term. I mean, if you don't make a good living, I get it. Maybe you can get away with, having roommates, aka house hacking or whatever, when you're young. But honestly, does anybody still want to do that once they're in the middle age period or beyond? My point is, if you're making under 70K, the first and most important primary thing to focus on is actually just to make more money, okay? To do that, you need to hone in on how to maximize your own earning potential or skill ceiling, right? The reason I set the floor, by the way, at just 70K, in case people think that that's too low, is also simple. Medium income means half the United States actually makes less in terms of households. So if you already make 70K, that means there's literally tens of millions of households that somehow live on half of even just that amount, okay? So if you want to save money, you can still do that if you start. If you make 70K, you can save even 50%, okay? And that's doable so long as you're at least making that medium amount, right? I mean, again, we're reaching, if you're in that mode and you're spending only 30, 35K a year, that's very strict and regimented type of living situation, okay? But at least it's starting to become possible, okay? Now I'm going to address the polar opposite side of earning, right? Of course, there's no ceiling on how much money someone can make, but since we're talking about what earnings are appropriate for firing, I would just say that, obviously having a larger income, I'm going to define that as more than 200K a year. It is easier, but it is absolutely also not a guarantee that a single person or a household can still get to FIRE. The reason should be very obvious, and that's simple in that similarly, there's no ceiling about how much you can spend at all, right? Especially in our capitalist, materialist society like the one we're in. Now, I want to go on a tangent. I love capitalism because this is the system that allowed me to retire, okay, and enjoy my life. I hear people who object to capitalism. I think that they're forgetting what that word actually means. Capitalism rewards people with capital, not consumption, okay? It's not called consumptionism or consumerism after all, okay? Change it up. My point is, in the world we live in, consumerism is emphasized so that capitalism, or capitalists, can ride on high. Now, people who have regular employment, even high-income ones, are not immune to the effect of the system that we live under. So, maybe especially for people who make good money, right? The temptation to spend it also multiplies, right? The opportunities where you can spend that money. Just look at the many celebrity actors that have made tens, if not millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in the past few decades, and somehow still end up near or at bankruptcy and forced to make worse and worse movies and ruin their legacies. Okay, I'm telling you, if that's not an example of making a ton of money by itself is no guarantee of any kind of retirement, I don't know what is, okay? Now, finally, I want to look at what I consider the most realistic group of people who should be considering FIRE as a reasonable alternative to the whole work until you die philosophy that the mainstream media love to shove down our throats, okay? Now, these are people that I would recognize as just regular middle class, maybe a little bit of upper middle class income, right? So anywhere from 70K to 200K in earnings, right? These are the people who already have some level of disposable income, right? You are not so close to the edge of having to live paycheck to paycheck for just the necessities, right? But also not making so much that, any of these group would call themselves rich, I don't think, right? And frankly, the advice that I have to offer here for this group is really just to avoid lifestyle inflation, right? Please keep in mind that tons of people, like I mentioned, can survive on half of even this earning floor of 70K, right? And on the upper end, there's no end in terms of fancier stuff that you can get, right? Until you become the richest person on the planet, there's always fancier stuff that you're not going to be able to afford, right? So if you're going to resist temptation to be taken by marketing terms such as organic on your groceries, it will help maintain your lifestyle instead of inflating it. Now, I'm not saying that you can't treat yourself once in a while or that you have to live like a poor college student forever. What I'm trying to emphasize is that those treat yourself moments, make them one-offs, right? Say, a fancy restaurant once a year or once a quarter, whatever you want to make it, instead of regular recurring costs such as groceries, your car payment, or housing. The insidious part of lifestyle inflation is that it does creep up on us. So be diligent to always work to counter it. And, how do you do that? Just keep working out those frugality muscles. Try to pay attention to the small things, and you'll be fine. So, in conclusion, of course, it is easier to get to FIRE if you make more money, right? But the floor to entry, I'd say, is relatively accessible. Because I've set it at the median income, right? Now, I get it. By my own definition, I've immediately excluded 50% of the household in the United States, and that might sound harsh. But I don't think it is, okay? Because even for people who currently don't make 70K or more, now, is that the end of your ambitions, right? If you don't have something right now, do you think that you're never, ever going to have it? Because if that's your mentality, well, the battle is lost before it has begun, okay? Plenty of reasons why somebody might not be at the medium income level yet, but there are just as many reasons that one can change one's current circumstances to be better, right? Again, I always have to use myself as an example, okay? I've been the same dummy that I've been for like 20 years, and my financial situation in those years have only improved over time, sometimes drastically upwards, right? So if I can do it, you of course can too. Let me know your stories in the comments below if you want. Cheers, à la prochaine.